Welcome to Phase 2, Part 2 of my video series on developing a match grade load. On this video we'll do some more advanced case preparation than we did in Phase 1. In Phase 1 all we did was basically size and trim the cases, loaded them up, and took them out to the range. So we're going to be doing quite a bit more in this video with case prep. Now the first operations we'll do are sizing the cases, trimming them, and then neck turning. And we're going to do them in that order: size, trim, and neck turn. Now I know people who turn the necks first before they size, and I understand their argument for doing it that way, but I always size, then trim, and then turn the necks. Specifically, if you remember, in the last videos we determined that our fireform cases here had an outer diameter of 343 thousandths. Now we've measured the neck wall on it, and we found that the neck wall here is 15 thousandths for a total of 30 thousandths. So that gives us an inner neck diameter of 313 thousandths. Now the trimmer pilot on my trimmer and the mandrel on the neck turning tool have a diameter of 308 thousandths, which means that the case will be just a little bit loose on the mandrel or on the trimmer pilot. Now if I go ahead and neck turn them first, what's going to happen as the case spins around on the mandrel, it can wiggle just a little bit, and that cutter then will give me an uneven cut, so I won't end up with an even neck wall all the way around. So I always size my cases first so that I bring the neck down a little bit so that they'll fit a little more snug on the mandrel for the neck turning tool and on the trimmer pilot for the trimmer. If the case wiggles a little bit on the trimmer pilot, then I may end up with an uneven trim on the case. It might be a little bit off, more of a diagonal or something like that. So I always make sure I size my cases before I trim them and before I put them on the neck turn tool. And then I always make sure I trim before I put them on the neck turn tool, because when you put the case on the neck turn tool, the case stops by having the end of the neck come up against the mandrel, okay? And then you adjust your cutter so that it will cut from the end of the neck almost down to where the shoulder begins, okay? So if the case hasn't been sized and trimmed, that distance could be different on each of my cases. For example, if I were to go ahead and start neck turning these the way they are, and I adjust my cutter to come right to that point, well, what happens if the next case I have has a little bit longer head spacing and the shoulder comes up a little further on the case? Well, what will happen then is the neck turn tool will start cutting into the shoulder, and that's going to weaken my case and give me a little gouge in my shoulder there, and I could have a shoulder separation or cracking or splitting occur. So before they go to the neck turn tool, I always make sure I size them. I have my shoulder bump back so all the head spacing on all the cases are the same, and I trim them so that the length of the neck is the same on all my cases before I put them on the neck turn tool. So those three operations are kind of integral. They all kind of work together. They have to, they all have to be, mixed together so that into one operation, as opposed to three separate operations that you could do one at a time, or not without really thinking about the other operations as well. Now the other question I get too then is, do I neck size or do I full length size? Well, in Phase 1 I full length sized them. They're brand new brass, so the sizing operation really doesn't do a whole lot. The bodies were set to SAMI minimums. The head spacing was down at SAMI minimum, so sizing them didn't do a whole lot, other than maybe for the odd case that was a little wide or had the shoulder, the head spacing a little bit wrong. It would correct that so they'd all be back to the same. But now that the cases are fire formed, they fit my chamber a little better, and the decision then to full-length size is based kind of on how well they fit in my chamber. You can chamber one of these and see if it'll go into battery, to see if it's a little difficult getting in and out. Maybe the body is expanded to the point where it won't go in and out of the chamber anymore. But typically that on a once-fired case, that won't happen. The reason for that is that not all parts of the case are created equal. The head, we have 4 parts of the case we're interested in: the head, the neck, the head, the body, the shoulder, and the neck. Now the head and the body of a case are work hardened by the manufacturer. We want those parts of the case to be harder than the neck and the shoulder. The case, of course, the head has to be hard, because it's part of its job, besides just holding the primer, is holding the expanding gases from popping out the end of the chamber. So it needs to be relatively hard. The body, when you fire the cartridge, the body will expand out to the chamber walls and help seal the chamber so that expanding gases won't come around the sides and come out the back of the chamber. Now, the harder a metal is, the more resistant it'll be to a change in shape. So when the body expands out to the chamber walls, since it's relatively hard, it'll want to resist that change in shape. So what will happen is, when the bullet goes out the end of the muzzle and the pressure goes back to 0, or atmospheric pressure, the body of the case will contract just a little bit. It has kind of a springiness to it. It'll go all the way out to the chamber walls, and then pressure goes to 0, and it'll contract a little bit. Now, if it didn't do that, it would be kind of difficult to get it back out of the chamber. If it were, expanded out to the chamber walls, it would be difficult to get it out of there. It'd also be difficult to chamber the round again the next time you want to use it. So that springiness is necessary, and that's why we only anneal the neck and shoulder of a case. If you over anneal, or if you anneal the body, you take away that hardness of the body, and therefore you take away that springiness, and it won't spring back. Over annealing or annealing the body of a case also weakens it. It'll become softer, and you run the risk of having the case fail. It'll show overpressure signs even with a normal load or a light load. You could end up with head separation. All kinds of nasty things happen if you anneal the body of the case. So you want to leave it hard. We need that hardness there so that it'll be able to do its job in sealing the chamber, and it'll have that springiness to spring back a little bit. Now, since it sprung back a little bit, it fits very well into the chamber of my rifle, and I don't want to size it back down to semi-minimums, because then it'll just expand more the next time I fire it. So this way it'll only expand a little bit, and it fits better in the chamber, and that's going to give me better accuracy. So instead of full-length sizing these cases, I'm going to neck size the cases. Now, one of the problems with sizing the neck on a case that's never been neck turned is that the neck could be a little bit uneven. It could be 15 thousandths on one side and maybe 18 thousandths on the other side. And what's going to happen then, remember we determined that we were going to size my neck to 338 thousandths outer diameter. And with a 15 thousandths neck wall on this side and a 15 thousandths neck wall on this side, that gives me an inner diameter of 308 thousandths. All is good. But if I have a case that doesn't have an even neck wall, if it's 15 thousandths here and 18 thousandths here, that means my inner neck diameter is going to be 305 thousandths. Now what that'll do is it'll make it a little difficult to get it on the trimmer pilot on my trimmer, or get it, you know, might have to really work to get it on and off of the mandrel on the neck turn tool, because it's, you know, it's got a smaller inner diameter and it's kind of squeezing the trimmer pilot or the mandrel, and it makes it difficult to get on and off. So if you remember from my video on the Hornady rifle dies, you have the option of either using the thin piece here, or you can use the expander piece. And the expander, what will happen is, you know, it'll expand the case as it goes in, and then the case comes up into the die. The neck gets sized down to 338 thousandths, and then as the expander comes back out, it'll expand that neck back out to 308 thousandths for you. So with a case that hasn't been neck turned, you probably want to go ahead and use the expander. If the case has been neck turned, you can get away with using the thinner piece that doesn't do any expansion. In either case, it doesn't really hurt to have the expander on there. I almost always use it. One of the problems, though, with the expander is as it's coming out of the die, the expander can catch on the neck here and kind of pull it, and that can maybe stretch the case a little bit, get the shoulder out of you know, with the wrong angle there, kind of stretch the case a little bit. So when you're using an expander die in your sizer, you'd want to use a case neck lubricator. This is the Frankfurt Arsenal case neck lubricator. I think RCBS and Lyman have one as well. They're only 10 or 15 bucks. But basically, they use this mica, very fine mica powder as a lubricant. You just dip the end of the case in the powder, and then you run it up and down the brush here a couple times. Normally this would be mounted to the table here, but I just use it like this. What that'll do is lubricate the inside of the neck a little bit, so that as it comes out of the die, that expander won't catch on it so much, and you won't have the neck or the case get stretched out a little bit by the expander. Now, also, since the neck hasn't been turned yet on these cases, they may be a little difficult to get on and on the trimmer pilot. So you can use the case neck lubricator to lubricate the inside of the neck a little bit, so that it's a little easier to get on and off the trimmer. I know I've had a couple of questions from folks who have had trouble getting their cases on and off the trimmer. Well, that's usually why. I mean, when you do the sizing operation, this opening here becomes less than 308 thousandths, and that's why it gets difficult to get on and off of your trimmer or your neck turn tool or whatever. So you can use a neck lubricator to resolve that as well. So we're going to use the expander die, and I'm going to use the you don't have to use the case neck lubricator. I mean, it's really only if you're having problems extracting the case from the die. Now this is a neck sizing die, so I don't have to lubricate the cases like you would with a full length die, but you still have a little bit of you can have a little bit of a struggle getting the case out of there because of the expander. So if I have that problem, then I'll go ahead and start using the case neck lubricator. But unless I have that problem, I usually don't do it. And you'll know if you've got the problem. I mean, you can hear the expander grinding against the inside of the neck, and it's difficult to move the handle or to get the ram to go back down, that sort of thing. So we're going to neck size die. Now, even though the body is a little springy and it'll come back, eventually, after you fire this case enough times, it's going to start to get difficult to get in and out of your chamber In that case, you're gonna definitely want to go ahead and full length size the case. I usually full length size. It depends on the brass. I mean, different manufacturers' brass is a little different. You know, I usually full length size about every 3 or 4 firings. On some brass, I can go a couple firings extra. On some, I have to do it every, you know, 2 or 3 firings. So once you size and trim your brass, you may want to make sure that you go ahead and chamber it, you know, and see if it'll go into battery. You need to do that anyway to make sure the head spacing's right. So now another reason I size and trim before I do anything else. The primer pocket tools are typically a separate operation and they're not really affected by sizing and trimming, with one exception, and that's the flash hole reamer that I have here. This is the Lyman flash hole reamer. The way this works is it goes into the case and it has this little drill-like edge on it here, and the further in you put it into the flash hole, the larger it'll expand the flash hole out. I almost use this kind of like a chamfer and deburr tool, where I just go in and enough to chamfer and deburr my flash hole and make sure all the flash holes are the same size, basically. But you adjust this by moving this piece up and down here on the shaft. So I'll get the flash hole reamer in as far as I want it, and I'll adjust this piece here and tighten down the set screw, so that every piece, it goes in the same amount on every piece of brass, so I end up with uniform flash holes. Now, if I don't trim the case first, and my cases are all different lengths, then this may go in further on some cases and make a larger flash hole, or not go in as far on some cases, and I end up with a smaller flash hole. So you need to make sure before you do the flash hole reaming that you've trimmed your cases, at the very least. Okay, so I'm ready to start sizing. I've got all my tools here. I've got my neck sizing die. In the neck sizing die, we've got my bushing for 338 thousandths neck size, which is what we determined in the last video. I've got my expander ball on here so that the cases will be expanded a little bit as they come out. I've got the depriming pin adjusted, so it's about 1/8 of an inch or so below the bottom of the die. Even though I'm not depriming, because these cases have already been deprimed, I've still got it in there with the expander ball on it. Okay, got my lock and load bushing, my die wrench. I've got my digital caliper here with the Hornady the headspace gauge. And I've got my dial caliper for measuring the neck size. And of course I've got my cases here. And the printouts, the batch labels from the last video that tell me that I need to set my head spacing at 1.618 inches and my neck size to 338 thousandths. Okay. So, next step. So I need to adjust my die to bump that shoulder down by a couple thousandths. Now, remember, it started out at 1.620 when it was fire formed in the chamber of my rifle, and we determined that we're going to get it down to 1.618, which is about 2 thousandths less than the fire form size. Okay. Now the way I do it, and there's a lot of different ways to do this, but the way I do this is I'll bring a case all the way up to the top, and then I'll screw this is my neck sizing die, I'll screw the neck sizing die over it. Since it's not a full length sizing die, I can do it this way. And I'll screw this down until I feel some resistance. And what that'll tell me, when I feel resistance, is that the neck sizing bushing inside there has just come into contact with the neck. Right about there. Okay? So I know that right there it's just coming into contact with the neck. Now what I'll do the first time around here is I'll turn it in about a full turn, and I'll run the case up in there, and I don't know if you can see it on the video here, but you can see that the neck bushing has just started to size that neck for me, if you can see that. So from this point I'm going to go about a quarter turn at a time and run the case up there. Now I know it's not hitting the neck yet because it hasn't got even halfway down the neck here, so it hasn't hit the shoulder yet. I'm just going to go a quarter turn at a time until it gets a little bit further down the neck. Oops. And once it starts getting towards the bottom of the neck there, I'm going to start measuring the headspace to verify that I'm not going too far here. It's still 1.620, so we haven't quite hit the shoulder yet. Another quarter turn. And I'll just keep checking. I don't want to go too far here because I can always bump the shoulder down, but it's not so easy to bump the shoulder back out. You basically have to fire form the thing again. Quarter turn. Looks like the neck sizing bushing has gotten almost to the bottom of the neck there. Still doesn't, still 1.620. Another quarter turn. Oh, down to 1.619. Now we've come into contact with the case, obviously, so I'm going to just turn it about 1/8 of a turn at this point. And the neck is completely resized. And 1.618. So we've got our shoulder bumped down to 1.618. Now, before I figure that's set in stone, I'm going to tighten my lock ring here just a little bit. I'm going to run another case through there just to verify that it's set at the right head spacing. .618. Okay, so the die at this point is adjusted properly to give me 1.618 head spacing, and the bushing in there, of course, is going to give me the 338 thousandths neck width. Now let's go ahead, tighten my adjustment or my lock ring here, and I'll go ahead and tighten that cap screw to lock that into place. So now I've got a couple of cases that are sized 1.618 head spacing, and just verify that my neck outer diameter is 0.338. So now we've got them sized. Now before I go and size all 400 of my cases here, I'm going to go ahead and chamber this case, or both of these cases, and verify that the will chamber, that the head, I may need to move the head spacing back a little bit. If it won't chamber or won't go into battery, but I'll check all that out, and then I'll get down to resizing the rest of my cases. Okay, I've got all my cases sized, to 1.618 head spacing, 343 neck size, outer diameter. Now, using a caliper like the Hornady headspace gauge on each one of these can be a bit time consuming. I'd like to make sure they're all exactly right. So rather than measure every one of them with a caliper and the headspace gauge, so what I've done is I've triple checked this guy here to make sure he is exactly the right length, 1.618 headspace. And I've taken my Reading instant indicator for 308 here, and I've calibrated it so that it will be at exactly 0. Let me zoom in on the dial here so you can see a little better. So that dial will come out to exactly 0 when a case of the correct length is put into it. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all my cases that I've sized, and I'm going to run them all through there one at a time. And as long as they come out to 0, I know that they are exactly the correct length. And it goes a whole lot faster with the Reading instant indicator than it does with the using a caliper and the headspace gauge. As you can see here, they're all coming out exactly right. Oh, spoke too soon. That one's about a thousandth too long. So I'm going to set him aside and resize him and get him down to exactly the right head spacing. Looks like my other cases are pretty good here. Oh, there's another bad one. That one's 3/1000ths over. I must have missed sizing him altogether. Okay, well, I'll have to resize him. At any rate, as you can see, I can very quickly verify that all my cases are exactly the right head spacing with the Reading instant indicator. So I'm going to do that for all 400 of my cases, make sure they're all the same head space, and then we'll be ready to move on. Okay, I've got my cases sized now. I found 4 using the Reading instant indicator. I found 4 of them that needed to be resized. And that Reading instant indicator, I did all 400 of these cases in under 10 minutes. Now that's an operation. Measuring every one of these would have taken me well over an hour. I did it in under 10 minutes with a Reading instant indicator. I found 4 that needed to be resized. So that instant indicator it will pay for itself many times over just in time savings. Now the next step is I'm going to go ahead and trim them. And just like in phase 1, the case trim length is 2.005 inches. The Hornady cases, since they were trimmed in phase 1, I don't expect there to be much trimming to do on these. The Winchester cases, on the other hand, those are probably going to need quite a bit more trimming. I'm not sure exactly. I measured 1 or 2 of them, and they were about 2.010, so there's a little trimming to be done on the Winchesters, but the Hornady match I don't expect too much problem with. And then I'll configure my Reading instant indicator to measure the case length and run through all of those and verify that everybody's at exactly 2.005 inches. And we'll be ready to move on. Okay. Now that our cases have been head spaced and trimmed, and all of them are identical, we can go ahead and do the neck turning. Now the neck turning is kind of a one-time operation. Once I've done this on this particular set of cases, I shouldn't have to do it again. It's very rare that you have to turn the neck on a case more than once. Now this set of cases is going to remain together for their entire life cycle. If one becomes damaged or for whatever reason I have to replace one, the replacement will have to be the same manufacturer. It'll have to go through the whole process of fire forming and sizing and trimming and all of that before it gets added to this batch of cases. Now, I'm going to use my Hornady neck turn, or neck wall thickness gauge, and my Hornady neck turn tool to do the neck turning. Now, before I did the sizing operation, I determined that I used my neck wall thickness gauge and determined that the neck wall on all my cases was at least 15 thousandths thick. So 15 thousandths on both sides of the bullet, 308 bullet. That gives me 338 thousandths. That's why I sized the neck to 338 thousandths. So that gives me an inner diameter then of 308 thousandths. Now, so I'll use my neck wall thickness gauge to check all the cases. Any case that's more than maybe half a thousandths off, as far as the difference between one part of the neck wall and the other, I'll go ahead and turn it. If it's within a half a thousandths, I'm going to leave it alone. You don't absolutely have to turn every neck. Now, if you don't have a fancy neck wall thickness gauge, you can use a caliper to measure your neck wall. As you can see there, this one is 15 thousandths on that part of the wall. Then what you want to do then is rotate it a quarter turn and measure again. There, it's 15 thousandths. Another quarter turn, measure again. So you can determine if one part of the neck wall, that one's about 16 thousandths on that part of the neck wall, so this one may have to be turned. So you don't need a fancy neck wall thickness gauge. You can just use your caliper and just measure it, every quarter turn or eighth turn around the neck, and you can tell if you need to turn that case or not. Now, I'm going to adjust my neck turn tool to cut the neck wall to exactly 15 thousandths. Now, I'm not going to use my nice match cases to do the adjustments. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of brass that I picked up off the range. Now, my reloading buddies call this range poop. It's brass that I'm probably never ever going to reload. I don't know its history. For all I know, this thing's been reloaded 20 times. So I just use this for adjustments and maybe adjusting my sizing die, or adjusting my neck turn die, things like that. I will probably never ever reload this stuff. Now, sometimes at the range, if the guy next to me is shooting a caliber that I use, I'll ask him if he saves his brass. And if he says no, I'll get his permission to collect his brass, and I check out what he's shooting. If he's shooting factory ammo, then I know that brass is once fired, and I can go ahead and keep that brass together and start using it for my loads. Now, of course, it's been fire formed in his rifle. So what I would want to do is resize it using my full-length sizing die, take it down to semi-minimum, then fire form it in my rifle, and then go through the whole process. If you've been watching this developing a match grade load series from the beginning, you'll know in phase 1 all we did was create a basic load and did some fire forming. So this is range poop. I keep my range poop in all together in a can. You could say that I literally have my shit together in my coffee can there. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust my neck turn tool for exactly 15 thousandths neck wall size. Now you can check out my video on the Hornady neck turn tool for information on how to adjust it, how to use it. You can also check out my video on the Hornady neck wall thickness gauge for how to use this and how to adjust it and set it up for a particular caliber. So, ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and do my adjustments and turn my necks if necessary, and then we'll be ready to move on. Okay, everybody's been sized and trimmed. Now we're going to turn them over and work on the primer pockets. Now, for that, I'm going to use my Power Case Prep Center. Put my primer pocket tools on here and do it that way. It's a lot faster with the doing it powered instead of having to do everything by hand. Now, the necks, of course, have already been chamfered and deburred when I trimmed them, so I don't need to worry about those tools. But I am going to run through 5 operations here, 5 different tools. First, we're going to run it through a primer pocket cleaner. Now, I realize that these have been cleaned in a wet tumbler, and the primer pockets look pretty good, but there's a little smudge of dirt here and there that didn't come off in the wet tumbler. So I'm going to run it through a primer pocket cleaner. And I'm going to run the primer pocket reamer. Now the reamer, normally you'd use this for reaming out a military crimp. But what it also is good for is to make sure that all of my primer pockets are nice and round and all, exactly the same size. So I'm going to run through the primer pocket reamer. Then I'm going to use the primer pocket uniformer. Now what this does is make them all the same depth, all of my primer pockets the same depth. Now I need to do an adjustment on this one before I can use it. So what I need to do, I'm going to take my caliper, and I've measured quite a few of these. You want to measure several and get an idea of how far or how deep your primer pockets are. Now these should be right around 0.125 inches for 308. Now I've measured both the Hornady and the Winchester cases, and found that they're just about 0.125 inches. So once I find one that's exactly the right size, and I've measured this one a few times, and I know this is exactly where I want it to be, 0.125 inches. So this is my reference case, if you will. What I'm going to do, this is a primer pocket uniformer, and it has a cutting edge on the top here that'll cut down into the primer pocket, and it has this collet around the edge here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run this all the way into the primer pocket as far as it'll go. Then I'm going to bring the collet down over top of that. And then I'm going to tighten up the set screw on the collet and lock that into place. Okay. Now what that does is it gives me a uniforming tool that will ream all of the primer pockets to the same depth. So remember, we're shooting for consistency here. That's the whole idea. These guys, I want them all to be identical. I don't want there to be anything different about any of them that would affect my the precision of my ammunition here. Okay, so I've got my uniforming tool ready to go. I'm also going to run them through a case neck brush. Again, they've been cleaned in a wet tumbler. They're nice and clean inside and out, but if you'll remember, we used mica to lubricate the inside of the neck for our sizing operation and trimming and neck turning and whatnot. So I'm going to go ahead and use the brush just to clean any residual mica out of the inside of the neck. Then the last tool we're going to use is the flash hole reamer. Now what this will do is give me nice round even flash holes in the bottom of my primer pockets, so all my flash holes will be exactly the same size. I won't get I'll get the same flash going through all of them. Again, I'm shooting for consistency. Everything needs to be identical about all of these cases. Now the way that you adjust this, again, this has a collet on it just like the uniforming tool. It goes up and down. What I'll do is I'll put the reamer in and I'll have it go through the primer pocket until it snaps into place there. And then I'll take my collet here and run that down onto the neck of the case. Now this is what I was talking about earlier, where all the cases need to be exactly the same size. You need to have your cases trimmed before you do this, because I'm going to set this collet here so that it regulates how far down into the case the flash hole reamer will go. And I want them all to be exactly the same so that all my flash holes get exactly the same treatment. If it goes in a little bit too far, then it's going to start widening my flash hole. Because you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but it kind of widens out here, right at the right here. So we just want that part of the reamer, this thin part of the reamer, to go into the flash hole, and it's going to act kind of like a deburring or a chamfering tool kind of thing on the inside of my flash hole. I don't know if you can see that in there. Okay. So I've got my 2 adjustments made. Next, we'll move over here to the power case prep center, and I'm going to have my primer pocket cleaner in the first station here. Next, I'm going to put my reamer in the second station. My primer pocket uniformer down here in number 3. Now, instead of using this on the handle, I'm going to go ahead and unscrew this from the handle. It's an 832 threaded tool, so it'll fit in the attachment points. Looks like a little 380 shell hiding under there. Okay. Now I'm putting the longer tools on the bottom because I don't want them to get in the way when I'm trying to do the primer pocket cleaning and reaming. If I had them up on top here, they'd be in the way. So I'm going to use the motor here to screw everybody in. Okay, so I'm ready to start working on my primer pockets. Go ahead and clean the pocket, ream it. I'll try to keep these held as steady as possible. I don't want to get them out around or get them in there crooked. Go through my primer pocket uniformer. I'm going to turn it around here and run it through my flash hole reamer. It's a little tricky to get on sometimes. You got to get the end of that into your primer or into the flash hole. There we go. And then run it through the case neck brush. And that case is ready to go. I'm just going to run everybody through all the tools. And what I'll end up with here is 400 shells or 400 cases. They're all identical. I'm being stubborn. There we go. So, it'll take me a little while to get all 400 of these through these 5 stations. I'm going to inspect. Of course, you inspect your cases at every step of the way. Make sure there's no cracking, splitting. Make sure everybody is in good shape. And once I have this done, these cases will finally be ready for reloading. And we're going to get to the loading part of it in the next video. So stay tuned for Phase 2 Part 3, where we will charge these cases and seat the bullets and run them through a few other operations. Now, a couple of things that you may notice that we haven't done yet as far as consistency is we haven't weighed these cases. I like to, once I settle on a load, I like to make sure all my cases are exactly the same weight, and that'll be in Phase 3. Once we determine what load we're going to use and what bullet we're going to use and so on, then we're going to start playing with, even getting even more consistent by weighing the cases, weighing the bullets, and so on. So, stay tuned for Phase 2, Part 3, where we'll get these guys loaded up. That's all for this video. I hope you liked it. If so, please click the like button. Maybe even subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and happy reloading.